All right, so I wasn't going to make a video about this John Harbaugh decision. To me, it's kind of a cut and dry decision. However, there was a certain segment on the NFL Today, which is a CBS football analysis show, where it kind of just frustrated me a little bit, and I think frustrated a lot of people who pay attention to analytics and things of that nature. But also, looking at this, I think there's a lot of people who are just genuinely confused by this decision. And I kind of feel like, okay, let me just explain why I think it makes sense. So first, let's talk about what the decision is. So here's the situation. This is a still frame of where they're at. So you're basically at 9 minutes, 8:56 left in the game, and you're down by 9 points currently. So the Ravens are going to elect to go for 2 here. And I think some people have the question of, why go for 2 here? Because if you instead just kick the extra point, it's still a 1-score game, and if you go for 2 later, you can potentially win. It's interesting. It's actually it's a Schrodinger's cat situation is what we are dealing with here, where the idea, if you don't know what Schrodinger's cat is, basically the way to think about it is if you have a cat inside a box and you don't know if the cat is alive or dead, then simultaneously the cat is alive and dead at the same time. Maybe the better way to phrase it is that, the cat could be alive, the cat could be dead, we don't know, and it's not until you open the box do you actually find out if the cat is alive or dead. But the solution, of course, is if you wait another day before opening the box, it doesn't mean that the cat actually lived another day, really. It just means that, if the cat was dead, it was dead the whole time. It's an interesting thought experiment that actually directly applies here, because the longer you wait to go for 2, the longer you have a much more realistic chance of winning in your head. The longer it feels like this game could go either way. You go for 2 early on and don't get it, then very quickly it seems like you don't have a chance, whereas if you wait, it feels like you have a chance for longer in a football game. But of course, the goal of football is to not have a chance for the longest amount of minutes. The goal of football is to score more points than your opponent. So I think the best way to explain this, and the way that I think will help people out the most, is to kind of work backwards a little bit. Because a necessary component in understanding this analytical decision is to understand that no matter what time you go for 2, it's using the logic that you have the same odds no matter when you do it. If you go for 2 in the final 2 minutes of the game, or if you go for 2 in the second quarter, you have roughly the same odds. Maybe you could argue the defense will be more tired later in the game, but the offense will too. Maybe you could argue just in a big moment, going for 2 late in the game causes nerves to happen, and it's actually more difficult to convert when you go for 2 late in the game. But roughly, you probably have about the same amount of odds to go for 2, no matter when you go for 2. So the logic is to, instead of think about it as how do you keep a 1-score game the longest, but instead you want to think what decision gives you the best chance to win. And the way to view it is there's kind of 4 potential outcomes. The first outcome is you don't convert the 2-point conversion and you went for 2 right off the bat. So now what's your situation if you're the Ravens? You have about 9 minutes left and you're down 9 points. So now you do at least know that you need 2 scores to potentially go and win. So that's the benefit of going for 2 earlier. Now, you could argue the flip side, and that's actually going to get brought up in the segment of, well, the Browns also now know you need 2 scores. So it does work both ways, but I think that there is more benefits to the offense than to the defense, or I guess I should say to the trailing team than to the leading team if you know it's 2 scores versus if you know it's 1 score. Because let's now go to the next option, which is you don't convert the 2-point conversion and you kick the point after first. So this now means that it was an 8-point game with about 9 minutes left. And what you might have done is you might have played less aggressive. Maybe with about 5 minutes left on a 4th and 4, you decide to kick the ball away. Whereas if you were down by 2 scores, you would have said, we have to go for it right here. So it's giving you basically better data to work from in the future. That's the logic behind it. It just allows you to make better decisions. In certain situations, this could even let you know if you need to go for an onside kick right away or not. But with 9 minutes left, there's bit of enough time that you don't have to actually do that, so that's not factoring in here. But still, the logic behind it is simply it lets you make better decisions, and again, the flip side is you could argue it also helps Cleveland make better decisions. But what are they really going to do? Are they going to now go for it on 4th and 1 if it's a 1-score game, whereas they wouldn't if it's a 2-score game? Maybe something like that would happen, but it seems very small likelihood that they would really have that impact any of their decisions for the most part. But it seems like for the most part, it puts you in a better position to go for 2 right away as opposed to go for 2 later, because if you miss it, at least now you know that you're eventually going to miss it, which makes things a little bit easier to game plan for the final 9 minutes. On the flip side, if you do convert the 2-point conversion and you kick the first point after attempt, even this doesn't have as good of an impact as it would the other way around, where let's play this out. Let's say you are down 8 now, and eventually you're going to go on to convert the 2-point conversion, but you don't know that at the time, of course. So if there's, let's say, 2.5 minutes left and you have all 3 timeouts, there's a good chance you try and score quickly to make sure that in case you don't get the 2-point conversion, you still have a chance to get the ball back and kick a field goal. And in doing so, now that it's a tied game, you've given Cleveland an opportunity to go down the field themselves and score, whereas if you're, already in a position where you're down 7, you wouldn't have made that mistake. So again, it helps you make better decisions. Meanwhile, the 4th option, you do convert the 2-point conversion and you went for 2 right away. This is obviously the best option out of the 4 if you're the Ravens. Then you're down 7, and again, you can game plan. You just need a touchdown. And there's even that X factor of if you wanted, you could go for 2 and try to win it in regulation, which is what they did last week. So you even get that added benefit of, again, there's a decision you can make there. So maybe they would have gone for 2 again had they gotten it the first time. So a lot of benefits for that, in my opinion. But, I think reasonable minds can differ to some degree. One thing that probably is worth mentioning is, let's say immediately Baker Mayfield throws an interception and Baltimore gets the ball at the 1-yard line. If you kick the extra point and are down 8, and let's say you don't punch the ball in, and now it's like a, 4th and goal at the 20-yard line, you can kick the field goal and now only be down 5 points, which is a little bit better than being down 6 points, because a mixed extra point on a touchdown with 6 points would now mean that it's tied, but that's a very marginal benefit that I don't really think should factor in too much. So, again, reasonable minds can differ here. And if you have, for some reason, if you think that there is a benefit to going for 2 later in the game, then you can make that decision. I think it's pretty clear you should go for 2. That's the way I view this, and that's fine, okay? You disagree, whatever. I don't really have an issue if someone disagrees as long as they understand my point. And I also don't really have a problem if someone doesn't understand my point, but, is trying to figure out what my point is. I think all of those things are fine and good. I think where the analytics community gets frustrated is people who don't understand your point, but also just have no willingness to actually learn it. Enter the set of NFL Today, starting off with Phil Simms, and I'll let him take it away.
I want to see the analytics people come up and do the interview after the game. Tell me why you did it. Let me hear that explanation. It changes when you're down 2 scores. The other team, as you said, Bill, they change their play calling and how they direct the game. So we don't put that into the analytics. Yes. I don't think, I don't know, I don't care.
That ending part is really frustrating, and kind of just goes to show how little respect people that aren't in the analytics community have for people who actually spend a lot of time to focus on a decision that's not even really analytics. Like, I didn't use any data or any numbers in this whatsoever. I just used kind of logic. Like, I didn't really use, I don't know if this counts as analytics, but the ending part of, that doesn't get factored into the equation. I don't think, I don't know, I don't care, is frustrating, because first off, it does get factored into the equation. Now, in terms of if you look at the actual numbers, it doesn't get factored into that equation, but that's okay. Like, you don't need it to be factored into that equation, because you can use your own brain to then figure out, okay, if it's close, well, there's this other aspect, so I'm not going to do it. Like, you don't have to blindly follow whatever the numbers say. This is factored into that equation. It absolutely is. But then him saying that he doesn't actually know if it's factored into the equation is more frustrating to me because, okay, if you don't know that it's factored into the equation or not, why are you going out and saying it's not? And why are you so angry about it? Why not just ask, hey, does this get factored into the equation or not? And the final line, I don't care, is kind of that answer, is he doesn't really want to know if this is the correct decision or not because he's already convinced his decision is the correct one, which it's frustrating to hear, I think. Again, if you don't care and you don't really pay that much attention to this stuff, then that's fine. Then don't care. But don't then turn around and bash the people who have spent a lot of these people in the analytics community, like the guys that the Ravens are hiring. These are people that have are math geniuses, basically. These are really smart people. So to just kind of shrug it aside because you spent 5 minutes thinking about it and disagreed with it, that's just what's frustrating about, I think, a lot of sports media today, in my opinion.
But before we leave that point, I would love to see, that's a great idea to have somebody who is in charge of the analytics, to have that conversation afterwards to talk about the other aspects of.
So I'm going to pause it right here. I actually love that from James Brown. Like, that's exactly what I think I wish people would say more, is he's not sitting here and saying he disagrees with any of it. He's just saying, hey, let's get an expert on and have him explain it more. I think that's fantastic. I love that. I think that was really cool what he said.
No, here it is. Here's the whole thing. Well, analytics told me to do it. Yeah. All right, next question. That's what we say.
Yeah, they'll show you a spreadsheet and
there's never any explanation of why
I made
all
decision.
These things that can happen.
This is just completely untrue. And this is just, again, you're just lying at this point is what you're doing. I don't think he's actually lying. I think he hasn't paid any attention into actually figuring out what it is. You can find no shortage of people who would love to explain to you why this is the correct decision. I can't get away from it on my Twitter feed. If you asked anybody who agrees with this decision, they'll easily be able to explain why they agree with it, including John Harbaugh, who right after the game gave a very detailed explanation as to why he made this decision.
It's pretty much a standard kind of really not a non-decision. You do it at that point in time because you're going to have to win a 2-point conversion. So you understand if you get it or don't get it early where you're at going from there, how many possessions you're going to need and what you're going to have to do. If you wait till the last 2-point conversion and you don't get it, the game's over. You've lost. So you try it early. We're in a 7-point game. We know where we stand. We don't get it. We're in a 9-point game, and we know that we need 2 possessions.
So, yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of people are going to say, hey, are you going to argue with these Super Bowl winners in certain cases? Well, if you're arguing for them, you're also arguing against the Super Bowl winner. John Harbaugh won a Super Bowl as a head coach. So it's just as logical to take his word for it than to take someone else's word for it. Finally, we're going to have maybe not the most important comment, but a weird one.
So paralysis by analysis. We overanalyze things. It's not that hard.
I mean, this is just exactly like, what are we? You're an analyst. Like, you are an analyst. This is what you do for a living, is to analyze things, and oftentimes to overanalyze things. The idea that we're overthinking this. You're supposed to overthink it. You're supposed to think of every little small thing you can find that will give you a slight advantage. That's what you're supposed to do, especially as a head coach and especially as an analyst. And listen, again, I'm not trying to say Bill Cowher doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a legend of the game, but what he was a legend at was being a football coach. What he wasn't a legend at was game management decisions. In fact, game management decisions have been pretty awful for even today. Even now, they're terrible. They were especially terrible back when he was coaching. And the argument isn't, hey, you need to stop knowing every philosophy you know, but it's instead to say, hey, we have new information now that technology has evolved to the point where, mathematics has evolved to the point that we can kind of blend this stuff together and use it in game theory, which that's a lot of what football is, and just with the new information that's come out, use that to your advantage. That's what John Harbaugh has done. It's not like at the beginning of his career, he was using a spreadsheet. Like, no, I imagine he still doesn't use a spreadsheet. He just trusts, when guys explain something to him, he just listens, and if it makes sense, he goes with it. That's what you should do. And again, I don't have an issue if you don't like analytics. I think a reasonable mind can disagree with analytics decisions. My issue is the complete lack of just respect that people have with regarding of the analytics community. It just, to me, it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how football is played in 2021. And I do think part of it is, I've made this comparison before, of if there is, the guy Lister, who actually Listerine is named after, he was a doctor, and he was the guy who came up with, you're supposed to wash your hands, because when you wash your hands, that gets rid of bacteria. But the issue is the doctors that were before him, they refused to do it because they just couldn't believe it. And if they, allowed themselves to believe that this is true and there are invisible germs on your hands that can infect other people, then they have to look back and think about all the people they have, hurt along the way. I think that for some coaches, they will stay true to this analytics are dumb mindset, because if they admit that analytics actually do make sense, it means that they have to admit that they made some dumb decisions over the course of their career. But again, that's fine, because everyone made those dumb decisions. None of us knew what we were talking about back then. Now that we know, we should probably, lean towards that stuff. There's no shame in that. But hey, that's just what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.